in 5 minutes. Enjoy the event. Got a nice big surprise for you. And we've got a lot of work to do in Scotland. A lot of work to do in Scotland.
Take the silence cue,
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the chairman of Reform UK, Dr. David Bull.
Fisgar Math Alba, good afternoon, Scotland. Wow, what a reception. Thank you so much. Look, it's so fantastic to be here with you all in Falkirk, of course, a town which played such a pivotal role in Scotland's industrial revolution. Now, as you know, I'm Dr. David Bull, and as you also know, I am the chairman of this great party. Now, I never grow tired of saying this. We, ladies and gentlemen, are the fastest growing political party in this country, and we are still the fastest growing political party ever seen in British history, and that is down to all of you, so thank you so much. Now, my chairman's tour of Britain started in June, nearly 6 months ago, and I deliberately chose to start the tour here in Scotland, in Perth. Such is the importance of this great country to the United Kingdom. Now, Scotland's history is long, it's dramatic, and as you know, it is distinct. I think it truly is one of the most beautiful countries on earth, with its dramatic landscapes, its historic cities, and its wild coastline. The country, as you know, has towering mountains, it has vast hills, and it has deep glens. It's famous for its awe-inspiring vast lochs, such as Loch Lomond, and its wild and rugged beaches, and its dramatic coastline as well. Amazingly, it also has over 790 islands, and Scotland's landscape is built on some of the oldest rocks on Earth. The Highlands were formed by ancient continental collisions. Volcanoes then created the Isle of Skye and Arthur's Seat in Edinburgh. And let me tell you, that's where my parents used to go courting. Say no more about that. Glaciers carved the lochs, the glens and the mountains during the Ice Age. Look, the place in history for Scotland cannot be underestimated. And then early settlers arrived after the last Ice Age, about 10,000 years ago. Neolithic people built some of the UK's most impressive ancient monuments like Skara Brae. And by the Iron Age, Scotland was home to Celtic-speaking tribes, and try as they might, those pesky Romans never fully conquered Scotland. And as you know, Hadrian's Wall marked the northern limit of the Roman Empire. Now, let's turn to innovation, because Scotland has really an extraordinary record of technological innovation. It is far out of proportion to the size of this country. Many inventions that have shaped the modern world were created by Scots or developed in Scotland. Let's have a look at some of those examples, shall we? The steam engine, courtesy of James Watt. That powered the Industrial Revolution. The telephone, of course, invented by Alexander Graham Bell in Scotland. Penicillin, discovered by Scott Alexander Fleming. That was then developed at St Mary's Hospital in London, where I trained in medicine, and penicillin has changed the face of modern medicine. The television, of course, John Logie Baird, he was the inventor of the television. And the decimal point, thanks to the Edinburgh mathematician who revolutionised mathematics and calculation. So what else have the Scots done for us? Let me just have a think. The safety razor, the vacuum flask, the bicycle, the Forth Bridge, shipbuilding and the Clyde, early computer science, robotics and AI, and here's my favourite. Whiskey, good. This is not word bingo, let me tell you. But my favourite, of course, Dolly the sheep from Scotland as well, yes. Need I go on? Look, the point I'm trying to make is Scotland's story is one of inspiration, success and triumph. But that belies the very real problems that lie under the surface of Scotland. Now, when you look at Scotland, it should be a monumental powerhouse. Its onshore GDP was estimated to be £209 billion last year. Now, when you add in offshore oil and gas extraction, that climbs to a whopping £223 billion. And yet, despite such economic success, Scotland faces some very real social and health challenges. Scotland has the lowest life expectancy of any UK nation. Scottish people live about 2 years less than their counterparts in England and Wales. A significant proportion of people in Scotland live in poverty. Scotland has one of the highest death rates from alcohol in the United Kingdom. Alcohol, as you know, is a major contributor to chronic illnesses such as liver disease and cancers and heart disease as well. Here's a really shocking statistic. Drug deaths are the highest in the whole of Europe. Half of all Scottish adults have at least one long-term health condition. And then we turn to obesity. There is an epidemic of obesity in Scotland. 32% of Scots are obese. That is the highest level ever recorded. 66, two-thirds of people in Scotland are overweight. And despite the Scottish Government having this goal of halving childhood obesity by 2030, the progress has been tediously slow. When you look at diet, only 11% of adults in Scotland eat 5 or more portions of fruit and veg every single day. And staggeringly, only 3% of Scottish adults eat enough fibre. As a medic, this is a ticking time bomb in terms of health outcomes. And on top of all of this, the Scottish education system is failing children. There has been a terrible decline in reading, in maths, and in science across the board. 1 in 6 Scottish people is stuck on an NHS waiting list. And when you look at the benefits bill in Scotland, it will be over £2 billion in deficit by 2030. That is a terrible statistic. And the Scottish Government can't even build a ferry. And I think you'll agree, that is what 18 years of the SNP in government looks like, latterly propped up by the Greens, wouldn't you agree? Yes. Now, when you ask the Scottish people, what is the number one issue in the country, the answer is the cost of living and the economy. And Rachel from Accounts, has just clobbered people by delivering what I think you can only call a car crash of a budget. The budget was a total abomination. It was a naked attack on Alarm Clock Britain, those people who set their alarms every single day to get up to go to work. She attacked the strivers, the workers, the risk takers. In short, this is what her budget did. Let's just get this clear, shall we? Taxes up, net migration up, household income down. And Rachel Reeves, you were almost right. You had two choices. Rachel Reeves, if you remember, then announced plans to freeze the income tax thresholds for a further 3 years, meaning that in 2030, taxes will be an all-time high. Just take this on board. They will equate to a whopping 38% of GDP. And personally, I think this is an astonishing betrayal from a party. And if you remember, they promised tax would not go up for working people, didn't they? That's what they said. Tax will not go up for working people. This was the mantra that was wheeled out time and time again after the last budget. And quite frankly, any semblance of respectability or trust in this government has long since evaporated. And on top of that, now Rachel Reeves has announced plans to tax people's properties. And strangely, she's now attacking people's savings, capping the tax-free ISA limit at £12,000. Now, that is total madness, because policy is meant to encourage fiscal responsibility and saving. So, if I was to tell you this, is it any wonder that 250,000 people have already left the United Kingdom? And this week we learned that 110,000 young people, entrepreneurial, aspirational young people between the ages of 16 and 34 have also left the United Kingdom because they have decided there is no future for them in terms of hard work and aspiration in this country. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a travesty. And Rachel Reeves has announced pay-per-mile plans, having forced everyone into electric cars, which many people didn't want to have in the first place. And that will mean that hundreds of thousands of drivers will now have to pay for every mile they drive on Britain's roads. Now, what she doesn't seem to understand is that in rural communities, you have to drive a long way to get anywhere. They are all in Islington. They do not understand what it's like to live in rural Scotland, for example. And here's the best bit. When she was questioned, how exactly is this going to work, Rachel Reeves had no clue how this was going to be implemented. No surprise there then. But perhaps the most astounding line item of everything that was announced is the fact they have ring-fenced £1.8 billion. Let me just say that again. £1.8 billion for the introduction of digital ID. Let's be clear about this. This is something that no one wanted, no one voted for, and for which there is absolutely no mandate. You know what this is about, don't you? This is about control. We are running full tilt into a dystopian world. And then to cap it all, it now turns out, and I'm going to try and be nice about Rachel Reeves. Okay, tricky. Rachel Reeves has been less than honest. I think that's less than honest, I am being polite here, with the British public about the state of the UK finances. Do you remember she talked about a £30 billion black hole? Well, there's a technical term for that. It's called a lie. It's a ruse. It was a ruse to prepare the ground for what Labour always does. Labour always taxes more and spends more. When you talk to Scottish people, they're also very worried about immigration. Under this failing Labour government, 38,000 migrants have arrived in Britain illegally this year alone, if not more. Since Labour came to power, that number actually rockets to over 50,000 people. They have a policy, it's called Smash the Gangs. It's not going very well, is it? So its one in, one out policy is now a complete global laughingstock. The one in, one out policy has actually turned into the hokey cokey. It's one in, one out, one back in, and so on. And the latest figures show that since Starmer's one in, one out deal was signed, 13,856 people have arrived here illegally. 13,856. So how many have gone out of the 13,586? 153. Tremendous. Brilliant. And then let's look at legal immigration, because under the Tories, the so-called Boris wave allowed 3.8 million low-skilled migrants into the United Kingdom on long-term visas. And here's the worrying bit. Nearly 1 million of them are about to get indefinite leave to remain. That means we, you, me, everyone who pays tax will be paying for these people. Half of these migrants will never work and will therefore rely on the state. 60% are low-skilled and a high percentage do not speak English. I nearly fell over this week when I read that almost 1 in 3 school children in Glasgow does not speak English as their main language. Almost 30% of pupils in these schools only speak English as an additional language. That is the highest anywhere in Scotland. And for my money, integration relies on a common language, common values, and shared principles. And this level of immigration, both legal and illegal, is not what the Scottish people were promised, was it? So here in Scotland, thanks to the extraordinary work of our National Director, Martin Green, and of course all our members and supporters, let me just tell you how well we are doing in Scotland. We are now polling at 20, 21, 22%. Ladies and gentlemen, that means... That means we are now polling, wait for this, in second place in Scotland. Our progress in this country has been extraordinary. We now have 19 Reform UK councillors in Scotland. That is more than in Wales. We have one Reform UK member of the Scottish Parliament in Graham Simpson. And we now have, wait for this, over 12,000 members in Scotland. That number has more than quadrupled in 1 year. And let me tell you, we are only just getting started here in Scotland. Now, the Scottish parliamentary elections are going to be held on the 7th of May next year to elect 129 members to the Scottish Parliament. It will be the 7th general election since the devolved Parliament was established in 1999. And we were talking about this last night. With hard work, we believe we could gain at least 20 members of the Scottish Parliament, and that would put us in a really strong position to challenge the SNP. But, ladies and gentlemen, we cannot afford to be complacent. We have to fight for the Scottish people, for Scotland, and for the Union. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is the moment when we have to come together, we have to work together, we have to campaign together, and between us, we will fight for a new Scotland. Well, our first speaker today was elected as a Conservative councillor in 2017 for the East End of Glasgow. That was a win, by the way, that Laura Koonsberg herself said the bookies wouldn't take bets on. He was then re-elected in 2022 before joining Reform UK in January of this year. And since then, he's represented our party on debate night, on question time, and travelled all over the country supporting our candidates in by-elections. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Councillor Thomas Kerr.
Thank you very much, David, for that very kind introduction. Friends, what a turnout. Now, that noise you can hear outside this hall is the Scottish political establishment bricking it because of every single one of you. So well done. And look, do you blame them? Just look at the journey that our party has been on. Now, when I first joined Reform 8 months ago, I joined a movement that was on the rise, but we weren't quite there. We had fewer members than the Scottish Tories. We were polling around 10%, and I became our 5th elected member in Scotland. Now, over 12,000 members strong, nearly 20 elected members, and Poland to be the largest opposition party in the Scottish Parliament, just 12 points behind the SNP and catching up fast. And that is down to every single one of you inside this hall. You reformers are the beating heart of a historic movement, and I'm honoured to stand alongside you as we take our country back. Now, friends, I first got involved in politics when I was 14 years old, and I've spent my entire adult working life fighting for the people of the East End of Glasgow, because I truly believe in the potential of this country and its people. That's always been the basis of my politics, fighting for the people who have been left behind and forgotten, the communities that I'm proud to call my home. And when I remember growing up as a child in working-class Glasgow, a child of addiction with 2 hard-working and inspiring grandparents that built me up and made me who I am, But despite that love and home, I remember seeing the devastation that arrogant politicians caused in communities like mine, where poverty and addiction was normal and social mobility was a dream, not a reality. And that's why I got involved in politics, to ensure no child grew up believing that they couldn't achieve their potential simply because of their background. And for a long time, I backed the wrong horse. I was wrong. I naively bought into Ruth Davidson's hollowed-out slogans and spin, but the reality is when you scratch the surface of my former party, they were just as bad, if not worse, than Labour and the SNP. Arrogant, out of touch, and detached from reality. And come May, friends, we will put the Tories into the political dustbin that they deserve. So, I had a choice to make at the start of this year. Do I leave politics or focus my attention and my support onto a new party? And the rest, as they say, is history. So why did I join Reform? Simply because of the man that we are all here to see today, Britain's next Prime Minister, Nigel Farage. You see, what those protesters outside, our political opponents and the media at the back of this hall don't understand is that for us, Nigel isn't just a politician. He's the embodiment of the vision that we have for our once great country. For more than 2 decades, he's warned about the breakdown of our country due to mass illegal migration, the collapse of industry like a few miles up the road in Grangemouth, and the economic decline that is happening to our country thanks to higher taxes that's strangling investment and killing jobs. Friends, I'm proud to call him a pal and be on this journey with him as he heads towards Downing Street. And speaking of great friends who have poured lifeblood into this party, our Scotland director and our very own Malcolm Tucker, who has led the operation as a one-man band, I would like to say a massive thank you to Martin Green for everything he has done. He has built this party from strength to strength in Scotland, and Martin, on behalf of everybody here, thank you for that. Now, I remember speaking to a supporter of ours in Hamilton, where she explained to me that this party provided her with hope. Hope for a future and our children's future. Hope for safety, secure borders, smart immigration and proper investment. Hope that this once prosperous and world-leading country could start showing up for itself again. And hope is exactly what joining this party has brought to me. Because the strength of this country doesn't come from buildings, budgets or statements. It comes from people. It comes from every single one of you in this room and outside there. And for too long we have been the silent majority. But now it's our time for us to be outspoken and bring our vision to the people of Scotland. Take my home city of Glasgow. Under these chancellors, I've watched it go from a once bustling and vibrant city of opportunity to a shell of what it once was. We've all heard the slogan, people make Glasgow, and as wonderful as our people are, they shouldn't have to do it on their own. Here's a question for you. Did you know that Glaswegians are over 40% more likely to face homelessness than anywhere else in Scotland? Now that's scandalous. And it can't be right that we have Scottish citizens on the streets of our largest city, struggling to feed their families during a cost of living crisis, yet continuing to welcome more people with open arms. But that is exactly what SNP and Labour politicians want. Under their watch, my city has become the asylum capital of Britain. And with John Swinney and the SNP, there is no signs of that slowing down. We have over 92% of Scotland's entire asylum seeker population in Glasgow alone, welcome more than anywhere else across Britain outside of London. And just this week, an FOI revealed by the Times showed that almost 20 refugees came to Glasgow per week in the past year. The majority of them were young, fighting-age, single males with no known nationality. Another report has showed that 1 in 3 children in Glasgow have English as an additional language. Now that creates barriers, it costs us a lot of money and it further damages social cohesion. Yet John Swinney and Anna Sarwar dare talk about a housing crisis and welcoming more. Friends, these two chancellors are more alike than you might think. They both sing for the same hymn sheet. They want to raise your tax, they want to shut down Scottish industry, and they want to bring in more migrants. Heck, they don't even know what a woman is. So let's be honest, the options being presented to the people of Scotland at this election are horrific. Either 5 more years of divisive and failing nationalism or a pretend new direction under an SNP-like Scottish Labour. And that's why we in Reform offer the change that Scotland desperately needs. The people of this country are angry, and rightfully so. They are worried that their already excessive NHS waiting times, understaffed schools and failing infrastructure will only be worsened by a resolve from this rotten SNP government that offers nothing more than talking about independence. Now, I don't know about you, but after almost 19 years of watching Scotland suffer under this incompetent and out-of-touch government, I'm determined to change the political landscape of this country and force the Scottish Parliament to deliver for my son and his generation. The next 5 months will be tough, but united together with one cause and conviction, I can guarantee you it will be worth it. Because no longer will we allow the Scottish Parliament to be a vessel for SNP ideology, backed up by weak and distracted opposition. Friends, after almost 19 years of the SNP, 14 years of the Tories, and this past horrific year of Starmer's Labour, this country is crying out for competent, motivated and forward-thinking grown-ups to finally take the reins, and that is our job. Every single person in this room. So let me ask you a question. Are you ready for it? Because over the next 5 months, we need you. Roll up your sleeves, chap on those doors, pitch up the street tolls, talk to your friends, your family, your neighbours, and deliver those leaflets, and man the barricades as we take on the political establishment. That is how we will get the change that this country desperately needs, by taking our message to the people of Scotland who, like us, are fed up and scunnered with the whole system. It is time for a party. Friends, it is time for a party that will finally put Scotland first. And you know as well as me that that is Reform UK. So, let's get out there and let's win it. Thank you very much.
Fantastic stuff. Thank you very much indeed. Well, our next speaker was born and bred in Fife. She is the daughter of the late John McDougall, the former Fife politician, leader of Fife Council, MP for Glen Ross and Central Fife. Now, she was elected as a Labour councillor representing Burnt Island, Kinghorn, Western Kirkcaldy and Ochtertool. She left the Labour Party to become independent for 14 months and then made the pragmatic decision to join Reform UK in August this year, making her the first Reform councillor in Fife. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Councillor Julie McDougall.
Good afternoon, colleagues. If you had told me that I would be speaking here today in front of all of you, with our great leader, Nigel Farage, our next Prime Minister, I would have never believed you. But here I am. And what a journey it's been. But this is only just the beginning of our very exciting journey together. I'm asked regularly, why did I get involved in politics? And I simply reply, we are all involved in politics. However, it was the death of my late father in 2008 which led me to this path. He always said, if you want to change something in life, don't just moan about it, do something about it. And that is what we are all doing here today. But it's with mixed emotions that we celebrate being part of such a brilliant, inspiring and energetic movement. So whilst we celebrate being here and the great strides that Reform are making, I just want to take a moment to commemorate. Burnt Island Shipyard, 1972. Kinghorn Bottle Works, 1982. A.H. Mackintosh, 1984. Seafield Colliery, 1986. Burnt Island Aluminium, 2002. Bifab, Burnt Island, 2017. Peter Gregg & Co., the last linen works in Kirkcaldy, 2021. And so it almost inevitably continues. And right here on our doorstep, we have Grangemouth Refinery, 2024. And now, November 2025, the announcement of Mossmorn Fife's ethylene plant with its 400 workers can be added to this list. And this closure is due to high energy costs, irresponsible economic and environmental policy choices. So let me take you back in time and live in memory along my stretch of the Fife Coast encompassing Kirkcaldy, Kinghorn, Burntisland, where we built things, we made things, we were an industrial powerhouse, and we didn't just make products, we made tradesmen, craftsmen, skilled workers who carried those skills throughout their lives. Kirkcaldy's linoleum wasn't just simply a floor covering, it was a global brand. Kinghorn's harbour and bottleworks kept a whole village alive. Burntisland's port and engineering yards sent ships, fabricated steel and skilled men out into the world. And of course the story doesn't just stop at the shoreline, just inland. Places like Kelty and Cowdenbeath were built on coal. Not just an industry, but a way of life for generations. The pits and the mines shaped everything, from the families to the streets, to the clubs to the institutes, and quite simply, the rhythm of the day was the beat of mining's drum. As the daughter of someone who worked in industry, I know and understand firsthand what it's like to grow up in a working class family and where hard work was the heart of family life. Dad worked at Longannet, Rosyth, Methil, and during these times there was such pride and work and family life, and this was during what we now refer to as alarm clock Britain. We are proud of our history in Fife, and when industry was the backbone of our communities, and it was more than simply employment, it was pride and identity. It was the lifeblood of our towns, built on the dignity of work. Generations went down the mines, and skills that they learned, they were carried every bit as specialised and hard-won as those trades near the coast. And make no mistake, when the mines closed, initially one by one, then almost in a flood, the impact was seismic. And these vibrant neighbourhoods, which had once powered Scotland, never mind Fife, for over a century, were suddenly left without the industry that once defined them. When industries close today, we are told this is progress and a just transition to reach net zero targets. The cost of building a greener, cleaner future. But let me say, our communities are not afraid of change, but what we cannot accept and what we will not accept is a transition that leaves our communities behind. Net zero is crippling our economy. We must be realistic, and we cannot simply abandon the people and places who powered the industries of yesterday. Our workers are not obsolete, our towns are not disposable, our children deserve not just clean air and green landscapes, but opportunity, real opportunity with good jobs and skills, and a future that is rooted here, not somewhere else. Fife has already shown the world what resilience looks like. We've transformed before and we can do it again. But only if investment flows where it's needed, and only if decision makers listen to the people who know this land best. And we must ensure that our communities like ours, will not be asked to pay the price. Yes, we grieve the loss of industry, but grief is not the end of the story. It can also be a spark, and a spark that ignites determination and demands action, and a spark that fuels belief that Fife and Scotland can lead again. So let us honour the past by shaping our future, and let us speak with one voice, loud, clear and unyielding, that Fife and Scotland must not be forgotten, and that the people that deserve the jobs of our tomorrow. For the sake of our families, our history and the generations still to come, we will keep fighting, and together, we will build a future worthy of Fife and Scotland. So let's go to these Scottish Parliament elections with fire in our bellies and stand up for the people of Scotland. Our communities deserve far better than this. And beyond this, when we win the general election and Reform UK are in government, Reform will scrap net zero. Thank you.
Now, I mentioned at the beginning of today's event how important Scotland is to the family of Reform UK, and so, therefore, I am delighted to announce today that we are taking a very important step in enshrining Reform UK's Scottish identity. Now, thanks to the enterprising and very out-of-the-box thinking by Martin Green, of course, Scotland's National Director, I am delighted to announce that we are having our own tartan made. Whoa, yes. So we can then produce scarves and hats and kilts and so on for our members north of the border. Now, details of how and what you can order will follow soon. And personally, I can't wait to address our next Scottish meeting in full Scottish dress. As a true Scotsman. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Well, on to our next speaker. He's a local councillor in Aberdeen, but like most of our councillors, he really has an intriguing backstory. He has a professional background as an engineer with a degree in chemical engineering and worked offshore before segueing into finance, becoming a chartered accountant specialising in the economic analysis of oil and gas projects in the North Sea. He holds an MBA and an MSc in energy transition. He played a lot of rugby as a young man and even has a few Scotland under-21 rugby caps. He also loves football, and for his sins, apparently he's an Aberdeen FC fan. Yeah. But you can forgive that. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Councillor Duncan Massey.
Thanks very much for that detailed introduction. I'll pay you later for the Scotland caps, but I had 5 of them. So I've been asked to talk today about the oil and gas industry and also energy in general. I'm going to start with oil and gas. Obviously, it's a big issue for me personally, but also for the whole of the northeast of Scotland and right across the country. You know, as we could see from the closure of Musmoran, Grangemouth and Lindsay Oil Refinery. The industry also got really let badly down in last week's budget, a disastrous budget as we've talked about already. So where is our oil industry now? You know, frankly, it feels like we have the deliberate destruction of our oil and gas industry by the legacy parties of Labour, SNP and Tories through bad policy. We now have a continuing 78% so-called windfall tax, despite the Treasury agreeing that there were no windfall conditions at all. We still have Miliband and the SNP's ban on exploration and presumption against new oil and gas, despite a little bit of tinkering to allow some tiebacks. And we still have large, ready-to-go projects like Rosebank and Jackdaw caught up in net zero regulation limbo. We also have a very unhelpful regulator called the NSTA, that's the North Sea Transition Authority, and as the name suggests, are now more focused on the so-called transition rather than the oil industry. The original regulator was called the Oil Gas Authority, and its focus was maximum economic recovery. It was called MER UK, and that's what we need to get back to, maximum economic recovery. So, you know, we're really starting to see the painful effects of these policies with job losses, lack of investment. You know, the industry has warned government about the impact of these daft policies, but they have continued as is anyway, just sheer vandalism. Yes. And, you know, the industry at the moment, it supports around 200,000 jobs, you know, right across the UK. It's forecast to add 137, or it was forecast to add 137 billion value add by 2050, again, with benefits right across the whole of the UK. Without action, and under the current policies, there's various estimates saying that we could lose 1,000 direct and indirect jobs each month between now and 2030. You know, right across the UK, from Aberdeen to Shetland, Grangemouth to Scene, Teesside and beyond. Another study by RGU, one of the universities in Aberdeen, said the workforce could shrink by approximately 400 jobs every 2 weeks. You know, that's the same as a Grangemouth, and that would happen for the next 5 years. You know, these numbers are huge, and as Julie said earlier, you know, this is real communities we're talking about. And what we're left with now, we have the UK imports well over 40% of its energy, and that energy has higher emissions, fewer jobs, and no UK tax benefit. And these imports are expected to get higher and higher as the industry is harmed. Also in the budget, the Treasury forecast that the current tax take from the North Sea, which is about 2.7 billion, would collapse down to just 0.3 billion by 2030. It's just going to be really, really painful unless we urgently change. And I think it's worth remembering that every single party, with the exception of Reform, has played its part in this travesty. The Tories introduced full net zero and all the regulation around it. They introduced the new regulator and they introduced the windfall tax. Labour and the SNP both supported the windfall tax, and of course the SNP were the first to call for the presumption against new oil and gas. Swiftly followed obviously by Labour, who under Miliband have of course enacted it. And don't get me started on the Greens and the Lib Dems. I think, and what is the driver of all these daft policies? Well, it's net zero, as Julie touched on before, or as Richard Tice would say, net stupid zero. Yes. We've had this net zero agenda foisted on us by diktat, without any serious debate or scrutiny, foisted on us by a political and civil service class who collectively would struggle to wire a plug between them. It's simply the wrong policy. We now have a failing energy system with some of the most expensive energy in the world, with a fragile grid and ever more dependent on energy imports through interconnectors and LNG tankers. And as a result, we are deindustrialising at a rapid rate, importing more of everything. We have nearly lost our primary steel industry. We seem to be doing everything to close down oil and gas. We have seen the impact at Grangemouth, Westmoreland, Lindsay Refinery, and we can see that right across the board, our chemical, pharmaceutical, ceramic industries have all been hammered. We seem hell-bent on closing our car industry amidst petty regulations and EVs. And really now, all manufacturing in this country is put at a huge disadvantage due to high energy costs and petty regulations. And the world is starting to recognise this. You know, led by the US, whilst I think we can have some renewables in the energy mix, wind in particular is now recognised as extremely expensive, solely dependent on huge subsidies for its economics. The unreliable intermittent energy that it produces drives huge distortions in the energy market and requires huge grid build-out, ensuring that everyone either gets a giant pylon or a dangerous battery storage plant in their backyard. And because of the fact that it's intermittent, you need 100% backup. And in the UK, that is gas or French interconnectors, which is nuclear. And meanwhile, all the mainstream offer, and particularly Labour and SNP, is to ignore this energy reality and just to keep gaslighting us about this so-called just transition. The reality is that any renewable activity is mainly dependent on subsidy, driven by distant utility firms and investment firms, you know, with typically some construction jobs when something is built, but most of the supply chain coming from coal-powered China. And as we have talked about, all the while driving deindustrialisation and crushing thousands of jobs elsewhere. So what should our energy future look like? I think we need to get back to cheap, abundant and reliable energy. You know, Britain and Scotland were the first energy superpowers through our use of coal. And to be a prosperous and successful country, we need to achieve this energy abundance again. We need to rebuild industry, rebuild manufacturing, and be competitive again. We need energy to enable new industries like AI and data centres. And of course, we need this energy so that people can heat their homes and have more money in their pockets. So I strongly believe that we need to get back to a pragmatic energy policy that delivers cheap, abundant energy again. And in the short term, I believe we get this by maximising our oil and gas resources and perhaps even restarting some coal.
Yes.
In particular, the North Sea oil and gas industry has a vital and great future if we get our policies right. That means moving away from the SNP's presumption against new drilling, fixing our tax regime by removing the windfall tax, and fixing our regulator and changing net stupid zero laws to ensure that these large projects can move forward. In the longer term, I do believe that we should be moving to some nuclear power. That's an area where UK and Scotland used to be a world leader. And I think overall, only reform is recognising this energy reality. I think only reform has always supported our oil and gas industry and will continue to do so. And only reform has the guts and the intent to take on the green blob and the net zero grifters. And only reform is backing the reindustrialisation of this country and the jobs it brings by getting us back to a future of cheap, abundant and reliable energy. We need reform.
Well, our next speaker is a true local. He was born in Aberdeen and has lived in East Kilbride for over 30 years. Before he entered politics, he was a journalist for over 30 years, holding roles at the Scottish Sun and the Daily Record. Now, his political career began in 2007 when he was elected as a councillor for East Kilbride West. He was then the Conservative candidate for East Kilbride, Straven and Lesmahago in the 2010 and 2015 general elections. And finally, he was elected as a Scottish Conservative MSP for Central Scotland. He's actually held a variety of roles, including being Shadow Cabinet Secretary for Housing, Communities and Social Security and Shadow Cabinet Secretary for Transport, Infrastructure and Connectivity. And then in August 2025, he defected from the Scottish Conservatives to Reform UK. Becoming, ladies and gentlemen, the party's sole MSP at the moment in the Scottish Parliament. Now, at the time, he cited dissatisfaction with the Scottish Conservatives and policies, stating it was a wrench to leave the party he joined at the age of 15. But now he is leading on policy for reform in Scotland. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Graham Simpson, MSP.
Well, thank you very much, David. He's really slick, isn't he? He really is slick. And if he wants to claim to be a true Scotsman, we'll have him. Now, before I get into my speech, I want to congratulate the previous speakers, Thomas, Julie and Duncan, fantastic speeches, all of them councillors. But we've got some other great councillors in this party, and I want them to stand up now. All of you. Fantastic, and there's going to be many, many more of them. Now, when I joined Reform just a few months ago, I offered to buy Nigel a pint. And the offer still stands. I also said that we needed to be the party to end SNP rule. And if we do that, it will be more than one pint I'll be buying in. Because the whole country will be celebrating. And when I spoke at our conference in Birmingham just a few days later, and what a whirlwind that was, as well as telling the packed crowd how bad things are in Scotland under the SNP, I said that next year we need a recovery government here in Scotland with us at the heart of it. Now, anyone going into politics should be doing it for one reason only, and that is to improve people's lives. It must be about public service. And that's what it will be for the big reform group in the Scottish Parliament next year. And that's what I'm in politics for, and for me that's what reform is about. We see a broken country and we want to fix it. Simple really, isn't it? That's our task in Scotland, just as much as it is in Wales and across the UK. You know Scotland is creaking at the seams under the SNP. We can't take any more of SNP government. We have a housing crisis, we have an infrastructure crisis, we have a health crisis, we're falling behind in education, but we have mini embassies when foreign affairs is nothing to do with the Scottish Government, and we have globe-trotting ministers who like to rack up the air miles while forgetting about the mess at home, while all the while agitating for independence. Now, I would like independence too. Independence from John Swinney and the SNP. And when we go into the elections next year, it should be with the hope of getting into government. Let's be ambitious. So it's only right that we should tell people what we would do if we get there. Well, repairing the mess of 19 years of SNP government will not be done overnight, but we must have the ambition to set things right as fast as we can. Health is people's number one concern. Just this week, the Auditor General published yet another damning report on the state of the NHS here. Last year, 7 health boards had to be bailed out because they didn't have enough money. And here are a couple of quotes from the report. Number 1, NHS Scotland is still struggling to provide healthcare in a timely way. Most waiting time standards are not being met. Astonishing, isn't it? And next, commitments to eliminate long waits have been made again, but it remains unclear whether they can be achieved. Worrying, isn't it? We need a health plan for the health service. Now, we can't grow as a country with tired infrastructure, so a reform government would commit to dualling the A9 and A96, ideally within the next Parliament. That's a challenge, but you have to have ambition, as well as the A75 and the A1 under a new infrastructure ministry, with delivery as its mission. Cracking on, not consultations. And we'd set out a 20-year ferry replacement programme. One a year for 20 years. and look at the model where the state runs everything. We would create joined-up public transport systems with simple, low fares and use technology that's existed for years to make sure people can access it easily and across modes. And we'd cut the number of non-departmental public bodies in Scotland, 132 at the last count. And that costs the country around about £19 billion a year. So we could merge some and we could close others, and we think this could save at least £1 billion over 5 years. We also can't grow as a country unless we equip our young people with the skills the country needs. That could equally apply to older workers, such as those at Grangemouth, just down the road, or Musmorran, which Julie talked about, made redundant thanks to ruinous government policies. And yet, the local college in both those cases, Forth Valley, which is just down the road from here, which could help to train the workers of the future, is facing having to close a campus. It's unbelievable. Across the country, our colleges are facing a mountain of debt. Now, John Swinney said he might talk to me about the Scottish budget. Then he said he wouldn't. Then Kate Forbes said they would. It's hard to keep up with all those U-turns. But if they do want to talk to me, and I don't think they will, but if they do, then I'll be demanding a better deal for colleges to stop any colleges closing and no tax rises. And I want to see a cut in business rates too, to help our high streets and the hospitality sector. One of my other great passions is housing, and it pains me to see Scotland in the grip of a housing emergency. None of the other parties takes it seriously. We've got here through decades of failure. There's been a failure to plan, a failure to build, and a failure to treat housing as the economic backbone of our nation. Housing is not just about bricks and mortar, it's about opportunity, stability and prosperity. When housing fails, everything else begins to fail. Our economy, our health and the trust people put in government. So we need bold, systemic reform, not tinkering at the edges, not another glossy strategy that no one reads, gathering dust, just real action. Because without it, Scotland will remain stuck in a cycle of crisis. Let's be honest about where we are. Homelessness is rising. More families than ever are trapped in temporary accommodation. There's a generation of young Scots who can't afford to buy a home. The private rental sector is unstable, with landlords leaving the market. And behind all this lies a broken supply chain, planning delays, infrastructure bottlenecks, workforce shortages, and a financing system that just doesn't deliver. Housing drives growth, productivity, and fairness. Housing accounts for a quarter of household spending, and it supports up to 15% of jobs in Scotland, so it really, really matters. When housing fails, the economy falters. When housing thrives, Scotland thrives. So, if we want a stronger economy, we've got to start with housing. So that housing will be at the heart of Reform's agenda for Scotland. We've built at scale in the past, and we must do so again. So what does reform look like? Well, first, honesty. We have to admit that decades of underfunding and weak regulation have left us here. Pretending otherwise helps no one. Second, integration. Housing must be treated as central to economic policy, not an afterthought. Every department, every budget line must recognise housing as a driver of prosperity. Third, whole government action. This is not just for housing ministers, it's for finance, transport, education and health, because housing touches everything. So here are the priorities. Increase supply, reform planning, invest in infrastructure and cut red tape. Modern methods of construction, embrace innovation to deliver homes faster and greener. Affordable housing and mid-market rental. Key workers should not be priced out of the communities they serve. Support first-time buyers, reform the local housing allowance and create pathways to ownership. And tax reform, rethink housing taxation to tackle wealth inequality and unlock investment, and get rid of the land and building transaction tax. If it's from south of the border, that's stamp duty. Empower housing associations, scale them up as major delivery partners. And governance reform, create regional housing authorities and supply councils to drive delivery. This isn't just about ideology, it's about practicality, it's about doing what works. I hope none of you has ever been homeless. Too many people are, and we must end that. We must scale up housing first. It works. I've seen it for myself in Finland, and it means embedding a public health approach. It means recognising that behind every statistic is a person who deserves dignity and stability. And while I'm on the subject of homelessness, we have to take seriously the issues being caused across Scotland by mass illegal immigration. The UK's immigration capital, Glasgow, can't go on the way it is, so we must change the lax laws that draw people here and put locals first.
Yes.
Scotland can't afford another 5 years of drift. We can't afford piecemeal measures and empty promises. Housing reform is not optional, it's essential. If we act boldly, housing can become the cornerstone of Scotland's future prosperity. We can't fail. Reform will build a new, more prosperous, fairer Scotland where everyone wins. We'll end the drift and division of the SNP. And this says Scotland needs reform. To me, Scotland is reform, and reform is Scotland. Together, we can do this.
Thank you so much. And that brings us nicely to our final speaker. He is a man who needs no introduction. He is arguably the most famous politician in this country, if not the world. His career is long, it's distinguished, and it's certainly most varied. Now, thanks to I'm a Celebrity, there isn't much of this man we haven't seen. His bottom has gained him a whole legion of new young supporters, and this year he was voted most influential politician in Britain at the Spectator Awards. YouGov now cites him as the most popular politician in the country, but ladies and gentlemen, soon he will make history when he becomes the next British Prime Minister. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the leader of Reform UK, Nigel Farage, MP.
Wow. Good afternoon, Falkirk. Good afternoon, Scotland. Good afternoon, Reform UK Scotland. Great to be here. And that reception was remarkable. I thought you'd just beaten Brazil in the World Cup. You never know, it might happen. It might happen. It could just be that Reform, rising in the polls, brings back a sense of renewed national self-confidence here in Scotland. And that's what it needs. Now, Martin Green has been our Scottish organiser for the last few years. He said to me, a few years ago, we couldn't get 20 people in a room. And here we are now, sold out at 750, and some people unable to come because we were so full. But to organise an event like this, you need a venue, and you need people on side to help you. And I want to say a massive thank you on my behalf, on our behalf, to the MacDonald family for sponsoring us today. And Donald, please stand up. Come on. Come on. Come on. I've embarrassed him now, but I didn't mean to. I really mean thank you. It's a fantastic venue. And you know what? He hasn't charged us a penny for being here. Another round of applause. Now, our once great nation, the United Kingdom, is in very great trouble. We are in economic decline. We are in social decline. We are even, I think, frankly, in moral decline. And those problems here in Scotland, due to appalling political leadership, the chronic problems the United Kingdom has are even more acute in Scotland today, and we have to face up to that. Now, I could do what all the others do. I could spend the next 10 minutes slagging off the other parties. I could tell you that the SNP care more about Gaza than Glasgow. I could tell you the Conservative Party have lost the will to fight. I could tell you that Labour are in free fall, and deservedly so. But I don't need to do that. Do you know why? The people of Scotland know it already. They know it already. And there is a huge gap in the political market. And do you know what people want? That one 4-letter word. No, not that one. It's one 4-letter word. Nigel. Hope, 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 hope. They want hope. They want to believe. They want to believe they can vote for people who've got the courage to face up to the existing problems and the ability as human beings with real world experience across a wide range of sectors to actually turn things around. And I know that as this campaign develops, as we head towards that first week of May next year, I have no doubt that all the other Scottish political leaders will tear chunks out of me on a daily basis, along with some of your charming newspapers. Do you know something? I'm not going to return the compliment. We know the failures that have happened here. We know that since devolution, Scotland has got poorer, weaker, crime is worse. I'm not here to play a political game of Punch and Judy with the others. We're going to ignore them. We're going to do our own thing. we're going to go out and sell to the Scottish people a manifesto based on hope, based on making people's lives better. We are the positive party of change and of hope. I had a meeting the other day with Jim Ratcliffe. One of the few days he wasn't at Manchester United. And we talked about Grangemouth, Scotland's last major and biggest manufacturing base. Grangemouth's going to close. And Jim is going to invest £3 billion of money in America. Not because he wants to, but because national and Scottish government policies have now given us the highest industrial energy prices in the whole of the world. And you can't make ships, you can't make steel, you can't make chemicals, you can't refine, you can't make cement, you can't do any of these things if you have the highest industrial energy price in the world. But this argument, and it's one that Richard Tice and I have been making for years, it's been difficult. You see, politicians today don't believe in God, have no concept of the Judeo-Christian roots upon which the entirety of our civilization has been built. No, they've given that up in the vain pursuit of something called net zero, believing somehow they're going to save the planet. And they're all as bad as each other. It was the Conservatives that put tax on North Sea oil and gas profits up to 75%. And now under Rachel Reeves, that distinguished former Bank of England economist, no wonder she was crying in the House of Commons. I mean, and Reeves has put it up to 78%. Oil and gas exploration is a risky game. Many of the drill wells won't work. You'll lose 100%. But if you make money and you're paying away nearly 80%, why would you bother? We are destroying the North Sea. We are destroying Aberdeen, and not just oil and gas exploration, but all the engineering, all the global leading expertise that has grown up in Aberdeen for half a century. And into the bargain, as we build more and more windmills, I've got a friend of mine, by the way, who's got a Scottish mum, and come on, wake up at the back. He, of course, loathes them, but we've gone down this route of wind energy. We give Scottish landowners £250,000 a year, £300,000 a year to put windmills on their land. And who pays the bill? You. You. Over the last 20 years, by basically paying an extra 20% on your electricity bills to support this madness. I've never seen a programme that has transferred so much money from poor people to rich people. It's madness. It has led to the deindustrialisation of Scotland. It is madness. And we'll fight to change all of that. I don't want Grangemouth to close. I don't want Jim Ratcliffe to invest $3 billion in America. I want him to invest it here in Scotland and to provide well-paid jobs. Now, just across the North Sea, we have Norway. Norway are planning 250 new drill sites over the course of the next 10 years. Sensible Norway. But there's one more comparison that I think we should bear And it's this. Norway has a 200-mile exclusive economic zone for the fish that swim in their waters. Norway has a thriving, absolutely thriving fishing industry. What do we have in Scotland? 12 miles, but really only control to 6. And no British government, no Scottish government actually has the guts to stand up and say, if Norway can do it, if Iceland can do it, if the Faroe Islands can do it, it's about time Scotland did it as well. Now, I've been told for years in London that the Scots have a completely different attitude towards immigration. The Scots think open borders are a wonderful idea. Is that right? No! Oh, the media must have this wrong then. Actually, the social attitude survey shows that Scots are equally concerned as people in England, in Wales, in Northern Ireland about the integrity of their communities. And that doesn't for one moment mean we don't welcome people coming in and bringing some diversity. But when I saw that figure earlier this week, that 1 in 3 school kids in Glasgow does not speak English as a first language, you can see what the SNP are doing to the city of Glasgow. And frankly, who voted for this? Nobody. Who voted for the wholesale change of the population of Glasgow and other parts of Scotland? Who voted? Who voted for areas of our cities to literally become unrecognisable from their Scottish backgrounds? The answer, simple, nobody. And Glasgow, the city of sanctuary, well, I'm sorry, but it isn't just the housing, and it isn't just the money. Here in Falkirk, there have been 3 serious sexual assaults in the space of the last week. And I'm sorry, but if you as a country allow young men who come from countries in which women aren't even classed as second-class citizens, and you put them up in 4-star hotels, allow them to work illegally, their attitude towards women is completely different to ours. So the social effects of this are appalling as well. And whilst this may be more of a Westminster issue than it is a Holyrood issue, the fact is the SNP have chosen to put people who come here illegally to the top of the housing list, above that of families in Glasgow and elsewhere who have worked and lived and paid into the system for generations. It is wrong, and it must end. Now, there is so much more to say, but I am not the main attraction today. We've got a speaker far more important than me about to come on the stage. Somebody who I think will have a transformative effect on our party here in Scotland. I love pulling rabbits out of the hat. I love surprising everybody. We agreed this about a month ago, but it hasn't leaked to the media. How do you keep a secret? Don't tell anybody. And we've kept this a secret. But I want you, please, to welcome onto the stage a very distinguished man. A man who's been a great success in many things that he's done in his life. He's currently the treasurer of the Conservative Party in Scotland. I don't know how long that position will last. He's also He also sits in the House of Lords as a front bench spokesman for the Conservative Party. So you're about to welcome a Conservative onto the stage. But I knew it. I knew it. I knew it. I didn't want him to get booed because he's coming on as a Conservative, but I suspect in a few minutes' time he might just have changed his political allegiance. So can you please welcome to the stage a man who is about to do a very brave, a very decent and principled thing. Lord Malcolm Offord, please come to the stage. They'd have booed you otherwise.
Wow. Hello, Reform Scotland. So I'm Malcolm from Greenock, and I'm delighted to be here in Grangemouth. Now, for those of our English friends in the room, the Lonely Planet Guide used to say about Greenock, it's not quite the end of the world, but you can see it from there. I always thought that was unfair. But I'm here today in Grangemouth with Nigel, and Nigel insisted that I be here to tell you guys first, to make this announcement to you first. As I say, it's not leaked. Quite incredible that has been the case. I have to say, every morning I check my phone to see what was coming. But look, today I can announce that I am resigning from the Conservative Party. Today I'm joining Reform UK. And today I announce my intention to stand for reform in the Holyrood election in May next year. And that means that from today, for the next 5 months, day and night, I shall be campaigning with all of you tirelessly with two objectives. The first objective is to remove this rotten SNP government after 18 years. And the second is to present a positive vision for Scotland inside the UK, to restore Scotland to be a prosperous, proud, healthy and happy country. Let me say the SNP have failed to deliver that Scotland. Labour cannot be trusted to deliver that Scotland. The Conservatives don't have the ambition to deliver that Scotland. Ladies and gentlemen, reform. Scotland needs reform, and reform is coming to Scotland. So for some of you wondering who is this guy up on this lectern, a little bit of background on me. So my name is Malcolm Ian Offord, but I sit in the House of Lords with a rather fancy name called Lord Offord of Garville. Now, I can tell you quite an amusing story about how I came to get that title. I'll tell you that another time. But the short answer is that Garville Point is the deep water on the River Clyde in my hometown of Greenock. And back in the day, obviously, Greenock was a fishing village, but the deep water on the Clyde is where the boats would come in. And then, of course, you've heard about James Watt and the Industrial Revolution, and that came to Greenock, and we became a proud shipbuilding and sugar refining town. And Greenock was a prosperous place 100 years ago. And I was born in a tenement in 33 Bank Street, just behind the Midkirk. And when I was a wee nipper, I'd go down to the Well Park on the swings, and that overlooks Garville Point. So that, for those of you who want to know why it's Garville, that is why it's Lord Offord of Garville. My family background was a modest background. It would be described probably as sort of lower middle class type concept. My mother was a nurse. My father was a building surveyor. These were the types of people that did not go to university. You know, the gig where they worked during the day and they did night school at night to further improve their lives. And they had 6 children. I was one of 6. In fact, actually, they trained to be missionaries, and they had intended to go to the Congo, but ended up in Greenock instead. So I went off to my local school. I went to Argown Primary School. I went to Greenock Academy. I got an amazing first-class Scottish education. And I remember my headmaster saying to me, right, you've got 2 choices. You either go to Glasgow University or Edinburgh University, and you've got to be either a doctor, lawyer, or an accountant. So that was my choices. Off I went to Edinburgh to read law, and the only thing that convinced me was I didn't want to be a lawyer. And it was good timing, actually, because it was 1980. I graduated in 1986. A big bang had just happened. Obviously, the Thatcher Revolution. The Companies Act in 1981, still the most important act put in place in terms of deregulation in the UK, Nigel Lawson, etc. And I fancied a crack at London. What did Dr. Johnson say? There's no finer sight than a Scotsman on the highway to England. And I fancied my chances there. I went off to London. I remember going to the Stagecoach. It's a bus station at St Andrews Square. And I was starting work on Monday, 5th of October 1987. And I was going to go down on a Saturday night. I wanted to go down because it was half the price, obviously going overnight on the Stagecoach. And I remember I had one suitcase, and I had my rugby kit, and I had a letter for a job. And I went up to the lassie in the kiosk and said, I'd like a single ticket, please, overnight to London. And she said, oh, she said, that'll be £1.99. She said, but don't you want a return ticket? That'll be £2.99. I remember saying, I'm not coming back. But I did. I came back to Scotland. I had a good career down in London. One of the things about being down in London was that this was what would be called the sort of classic Scottish, the Scottish brand. What does that mean? What does the Scottish brand mean down in the city? What it meant was basically you were a lad of parts, is sort of the words that used. You're well educated, you're honest, and you're hardworking. What a good brand that is, eh? So, that took me a long way, but I came back up here in 2014 after 25 years. And of course, then that's when I got politically motivated because we had the first Indie ref. 3.6 million people voted in that referendum. Political scientists around the world study that referendum. 85% turnout, the highest turnout of any election except in Australia where it's compulsory to vote. And it was decisive, wasn't it? 2 million people voted to stay in the UK and 1.6 million people voted to leave. And that was for a generation, wasn't it? So that was done. And then I found myself in 2020 and Nicola's got a plan to have another referendum. And at this point, I found myself throwing things at the telly. And that's when you've got to stand up and say, right, I'm going to do something. So I thought, right, do you know what? I'm going to have a go at this. I'm going to have a go at Hollywood. But it was COVID. And couldn't get out to meet anybody, couldn't get out to leaflet with anybody, couldn't campaign. So it was a bit of a waste of time. So I sat myself down and wrote myself a letter, as you do. And I wrote a wee pamphlet saying, why should Scotland remain inside the UK? And it turned out to be 7 essays, and it got picked up by The Spectator, and it got picked up by CPS, etc., etc. And I got a phone call from Alistair Jack, who was then Secretary of State for Scotland. And he said, Malcolm, I've been following what you're doing. Would you like to come in and help me in the Scotland office? And that came out of the blue. And I said, well, what's the job? And he said, we've got to take on the Nats. And I said, okay, I'm up for that. I'll come and join you. So I joined. And of course, the bit I didn't get was, well, how do I do that? I'm not an MP. And he sort of laughed at me down the phone and said, do you not know? I said, no. He said, we're going to put you in the House of Lords. So that's how that came about. I joined the House of Lords. Quite a bizarre concept. But I was then a minister in the Scotland office, which I have to say at that time was probably the most engaged Scotland office we'd had for 25 years. What happened was basically London, Whitehall, when the devolution settlement was passed in 1999, it was basically devolve and forget. And they basically just didn't get involved in Scottish affairs anymore. And as a result, we then got more engaged. My job was to go and see the 32 local authorities in Scotland. And that's when I discovered something quite interesting, which is that when I spoke to the 32 local authorities, I discovered they were very interested in talking to the UK government because we had ideas, ambition, and we had money. And we wanted them to be successful and ambitious in their own communities. And what I discovered was they said, we don't get any of that from Edinburgh. We don't get any of that communication or engagement from the SNP in Edinburgh. I was thinking, this devolution, they call for more power back all the time from London to Edinburgh. When it gets to Edinburgh, it seems to get hoarded. It doesn't seem to get pushed down to local authorities. I remember, lots more stories I can tell you another time, but perhaps the highlight was when I was up in Inverness at the Highland Authority, and they had trouble. Remember, the Corran ferry broke down. And if you're going across, to Strontian, it's only 10 minutes on the ferry, but if not, it's an hour and a half drive, right? And they wanted a bit of help. And I was talking to the leader of the council, who was an SNP man. And the highlight of my little moment was to say, okay, I can help you with some money, but in return, you've got to put a Union flag on the ferry. So look, here I am. So why am I here, and what are the questions that you should be asking me? And I sort of worked it out in two bits. First question is, what lessons did I learn as a minister in the Conservative government in the last 3 years of the 14? And secondly, why am I leaving the Conservative Party after 1 year in opposition? So let's deal with the first one first. What I learned, I had 3 prime ministers in 3 years. There was no clear principles and no clear ideology. It was a shambles. We had career politicians opportunistically working out what they wanted for themselves. They would talk about this concept called legacy, right? My legacy. Isn't legacy something that's given to you, bequeathed on you, years later by historians? It's not something you create for yourself. What a selfish concept. And so we have weather-vane politicians blowing in the wind. Poor old Boris didn't know whether to leave or remain. Poor Liz, she didn't know whether to cut taxes or do a massive big state spending on paying everyone's electricity bills. So she did it both on the same day. And poor old Rishi didn't know whether to eat out or ban smoking. And then in the meantime, as I interacted with the various secretaries of states and departments, I saw ministers not in control of their brief and not in control of the departments. I saw civil servants dictating matters. Now, there were some exceptions to that, and I think actually there were some really well-run departments by good ministers. Michael Gove ran a tight ship at education and levelling up. Alistair Jack certainly ran a very strong Scotland office. And even Kemi Latterley in DBT was doing really well with the trade deals post-Brexit. But interacting with people from the Treasury, the Home Office, DEFRA, DESNES, DWP, I found politicians who were more interested in their own career moves than actually dictating what policy should be in their department. And this is a great lesson and opportunity for reform. Number one, do you think you know what Nigel Farage stands for? Yes. Has he changed his mind over 20 years? No. So do you think, therefore, that he'll give clear direction to the country? Yes. And second of all, Danny Cougar's got a big job. Danny Cougar's got a big job to basically get a cadre of very talented people in who will be new ministers to understand that ministers, advisors can advise, but ministers decide. And ministers should be in charge. So coming to the second question, why am I leaving? And I want to give you a UK perspective and then a Scottish perspective. When we moved into opposition, I thought I've done 3 years in the government, 2 years in Scotland office, and 1 year as export minister. I did an April Fool's, actually, on the 1st of April, where I put a clip out saying that I'd managed to persuade the Prime Minister that I could change my name to the McEwan's Minister for Exports. And I got told to take it down. Anyway, so I thought that was it, that was done. And then Kemi asked me to come and do a job for her. She said, I want you to look at energy. The Conservative Party have got themselves in a bad place in energy. I said, why are you putting me into that? She said, because you're a business guy, and you'll look at it with a clear view, and you don't have any baggage on the issue. So I did. I looked at it. And of course, when one begins to do that, you peel back the onion. And I have to tell you, folks, I was pretty shocked and horrified by what I found. And perhaps that was the start of my journey to reform. That we have now got energy prices 7 times more expensive than China, 4 times more expensive than the USA, and we've done this to ourselves. That we import 70% of our gas from Norway, from fields that are over the fence from the ones that we're shutting down. Yep. Even the Norwegian energy minister thinks that's daft. And we've done this to ourselves. 2/3 of the price of your bills are not even the energy that you spend. And look at what's happened for us, for Scots particularly. I mean, here we are, obviously here in Grangemouth, just around the corner there. I mean, you mentioned Jim Ratcliffe and the Ineos cracker. I went to see the Ineos, and obviously there's a refinery, and there's also the cracker next door, the ethylene cracker. There's 40 of those in Europe. The one in Grangemouth is the second most efficient in Europe, but it can't make a profit in the UK. If you picked it up and dropped it into Texas, it'd make a profit of 150 million a year. That's a lot of jobs and a lot of livelihoods. But the cost of energy and carbon tax, self-inflicted, mean that is in jeopardy. We've got Alexander Dennis just down the road, where we've got the Scottish Government virtue signalling on green policy, giving out taxpayers' money to buy buses made in China, using slave wages, whereas our companies have, quite rightly, paid a living wage. The hypocrisy of this is extraordinary. Of course, in the North Sea, we've talked about 1,000 jobs a week. So I was sort of thinking to myself, you know what, this is bad. Perhaps this is an aberration. Except you then begin to look at, peel the onion on the other areas of public life. Immigration. Oops, that looks a bit out of control. 2.6 million people coming through on the 5-year Boris wave. Did that happen under the Conservative government? What about our economy? Taxation at the highest level has been since the Second World War. Borrowing at the highest level since the Second World War. And welfare. Seems like this is a country now where you're better off not working than working. The Conservatives will say, and rightly, that Labour, since they come into power, have made all of these 5 areas worse. That is correct. But let's not kid ourselves, ladies and gentlemen, that this mess was created by the Conservative Party. And the question the British public are being asked is, would you trust the people who made the mess to clean up the mess? No. And are the British public fed up with this monopolitics? Yes. And therefore, are the British people ready for reform? Yes. And giving you a Scottish perspective, I mean, I've got a little bit of a confession to make here, because to be honest with you, I'm not that concerned with UK politics, because I think that Nigel's going to sort that out. But I am concerned with Scottish politics. Very concerned about what happens in Scotland. And that's why I'm leaving the Scottish Conservative Party, because the Scottish Conservative Party, I believe, have given up on Scotland. And, ladies and gentlemen, I can't do that. And let me explain. So during the last year, during 2025, I did involve myself much more in Holyrood as I could during the last 12 months, having previously just been in London for 3 years. And in fact, actually, I supported Russell Finlay to be the leader and raised money for his campaign. But what I found, quite candidly, is a party which is regional, not national, parochial, not political, timid, not ambitious. A party without a vision of how to govern Scotland with a right-of-centre agenda. And I have to say, I try to help. Having seen the devolution up close and seen how the Scottish National Party have failed to implement devolution when I was in the Scotland office, I do firmly believe that within the devolution settlement we can make Scotland the most prosperous part of the UK. But you need to have a vision and want to do it. You need policies to do that. And I went off on a slight tangent on my own. I got involved with the Centre for Policy Studies, who as you know, over the last 50 years, I've produced probably the most centre-right policies for UK parties, mostly the Conservatives. And we did a pamphlet, and we called it Wealthy Nation, Healthy Nation. And we got some contributors in the world of health and education particularly, looked at the economy to find out what it is that's gone wrong in Scotland. And in that was some ideas about some policy. What was the response of the Scottish Conservative Party? Turns out they don't want policies. Turns out they're not interested in having policies. Turns out they've got one policy, say no to independence. But what I learned is that there's actually a codependent relationship now between the Scottish Conservative Party and the Scottish National Party. It suits them both to obsess with independence, while Scotland, in the meantime, gets badly governed. And I believe Scottish people deserve more than this. Ladies and gentlemen, I say it again, Scotland needs reform, and reform is coming to Scotland. Yes. So, it's a great pleasure to be with you all here today in Falkirk, and I look forward to campaigning with you all between now and the 7th of May. Ladies and gentlemen, let's run a positive campaign in Scotland, full of hope, full of ambition, and reform. We can present the people of Scotland with an aspiration to become a prosperous, proud, healthy, and happy country. A country where work is respected and rewarded, where education is restored to world class, where healthcare is reformed for the benefit of all, where local communities are revitalised and not overrun by uncontrolled migration. A country where our young people are skilled up in the modern economy, clustered around our natural centres of excellence. A country where our adults are encouraged and retrained and incentivised to go back to work, where the best welfare anyone can get is a good job, which allows them the best welfare anyone can have is a good job, which allows them to build a good home. Ladies and gentlemen, a country that works will become a wealthy country and a healthy country. Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard from various speakers about our heritage as Scots. We invented them on the world with our innovation, our science, our technology, but most of all, our hard work. Isn't it time now to reclaim our inheritance? Yes. So let me conclude just with some personal remarks. As Danny Kruger reflected when he joined Reform, it's not easy to say goodbye to former colleagues, some of whom have become good friends. For me, these two former colleagues are Alistair Jack and Kemi Badenoch, and I've not been able to forewarn them on this announcement because obviously this has been embargoed for obvious reason. To Alistair and Kemi, I say, it's not personal, but I need to put country before party. The Scottish Conservative Party, by their own admission, are unelectable. And Scotland needs a centre-right alternative in Holyrood next year. Reform is the only party with a restoration narrative to make Scotland wealthy and healthy again, and I must play my part. Therefore, not to make amends, but more as a point of principle, I must now give up my place in the House of Lords, resign from the front bench, and return my peerage whence it came. This will allow me to campaign for reform in the Holyrood election, as good old Malcolm offered. And in so doing, I take great comfort from the bard. A prince can mack a belted knight, a marquess, duke, and all that. The rank is but the guinea's stamp. A man's a man for all that.
Thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you have just witnessed something that is extraordinarily brave. Extraordinarily brave. I mean, the House of Lords is the best old people's home in the whole of the country. And he's giving all that up. He's giving the title up. He's giving the cushy number up to join us, to come on the streets and campaign and fight for us. And I think today is a big day. It's a big day for Reform Scotland. I'll be back here repeatedly between now and next May. I'll be going all over Scotland. I'll be campaigning not just with Malcolm, but with the other candidates. And by the way, if any of you want to stand, it's not too late, although there isn't very long. And we aim next May to do something truly remarkable in those Scottish Parliament elections. And I know from the atmosphere in this room today, from the growth of the party in Scotland, from the quality, the calibre of people that are joining us, that we can and we will do something remarkable. But today, it's Malcolm's day. Welcome to the party.